Okay, so if you've been following AI news, especially in healthcare, you've definitely seen the headlines. They're pretty glowing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. These big frontier models, we're talking GPT-5, Gemini 2.5 Pro, GPT-4o, seem to be just crushing complex medical exams.
Exactly. They're topping leaderboards, scoring incredibly high on benchmarks from, really prestigious sources like the New England Journal of Medicine, Jimana.
And that performance, well, it looks fantastic on paper, but the sources we're digging into today, they reveal something pretty critical, maybe even dangerous hiding behind those numbers.
Which is,
It's what they call the illusion of readiness in health AI. So our mission here is to get past those shiny scores. We're looking at detailed stress test results for 6 big models across 6 major medical benchmarks.
and the goal is to see what's really going on
Mhm.
beyond just the final grade.
Precisely. We want to understand the hidden weaknesses, things like shortcut learning and fabricated reasoning, because that changes the whole picture about whether these things are actually ready.
Okay, let's unpack that. If a model gets, say, 80 or 90% on a tough medical exam, you'd think it's genuinely smart, right? But you're saying the tests themselves might be flawed, rewarding the wrong things.
That's the core problem, yeah. Current benchmarks often end up rewarding good test-taking strategies rather than, like, deep medical understanding. It's what researchers call shortcut learning.
But they're not really reasoning like a doctor, they're just finding patterns.
Exactly. They learn statistical tricks from the massive data sets they're trained on.
Can you give me a quick example? What does that look like?
Sure. So, a really robust AI should look at, say, an MRI, read the patient history, and put it all together for a diagnosis.
Right, integrated reasoning.
Yes, but a shortcut model might just learn that, in its training data, the words productive cough and fever very often appear alongside the answer pneumonia.
Ah, so it connects the words, not the medical concepts.
Pretty much. It's sophisticated pattern matching, not clinical judgment. It gets the answer right on the test, but it's for the wrong reason.
That difference feels huge, especially in medicine.
It is, and these stress tests immediately highlighted 3 really big fragilities.
Okay, what were they?
First, and this one's pretty shocking, models were getting answers right even when crucial evidence, like an image, was completely removed.
Wait, how? If the image is needed for the diagnosis.
That's the shortcut learning in action. Second, their performance was incredibly brittle. Tiny changes, like just shuffling the multiple choice options,
Oh,
like A, B, C, D becoming D, A, B, C, could make the model totally flip its answers.
seriously, just reordering them.
Yep. And the third one, which is quite worrying, is fabricated reasoning.
Fabricated reasoning, meaning they lie.
Well, they don't just guess randomly. They confidently give you a wrong answer, but then they justify it with a rationale that sounds perfectly plausible, medically sound even.
That's wrong.
Completely wrong. Sometimes they even describe things in an image that literally aren't there. Pure hallucination.
Wow. Confidence paired with being wrong.
Hmm.
That sounds dangerous.
That's exactly it. These aren't just little glitches. They're fundamental problems with how we're evaluating these things, and it masks how they might fail in the real world. We need to know they work for the right reasons.
Okay, so let's dive into the evidence. Stress tests 1 and 2 focused on this idea of modality robustness.
Right. Basically, how well do these models cope when a key type of information, a modality like the visual image, is missing? Because in real medicine, data is often incomplete.
Makes sense. So stress test 1 compared performance with the image and text versus just the text alone.
Exactly. We looked at NEJM and JAMA benchmarks, and the first big finding was how differently the models reacted. They might start with similar high scores when they have everything,
They'll take away the image.
and they diverge sharply. On the NEJM benchmark, which often has visually complex cases, GPT-5 score dropped over 13 percentage points, from about 81% down to 67.5%.
13 points. That's a huge chunk of its supposed knowledge just vanishing when it can't see.
It really is. Suggests a lot of that initial success was heavily dependent on the visual input, and Gemini 2.5 Pro dropped even more, nearly 15 points.
So some models are more reliant on the visual than others, even if their overall scores look similar.
That's part of it. But what's also fascinating is the benchmark difference. NEJM scores tanked without the image, but JAMA scores, much more stable. GPT-5 only lost about 3.7 points there.
Hold on, why would JAMA be so different? Aren't they both top-tier medical tests?
They test different skills, it seems. The JAMA stability suggests many of its questions can be answered correctly just from the text provided. The image might be there, but it's often not strictly necessary.
Ah, okay. So JAMA might be testing text comprehension and reasoning more, while any JAM really needs that visual text integration.
Precisely. Lumping scores from both together on a leaderboard hides these crucial differences. You don't know why a model is scoring high.
Which leads us to stress test 2, modality necessity. This sounds even more targeted.
It was. Clinicians went through and handpicked 175 NEJM questions where they all agreed. You absolutely need the image to get the right answer. Then we tested the models on those specific questions, but without the image.
So if the image is truly necessary, the score should be near random chance, right? Like 20% for a 5-choice question.
That's what you'd expect. But here's the kicker. GPT-5, without the essential image, still scored almost 38%.
Nearly double random chance. How is that even possible if the visual clue is gone?
Shortcut learning again. It's picking up on subtle cues in the text, maybe frequency priors, like what's the most common diagnosis associated with these keywords, even when the defining evidence is missing. It's making an educated guess based on flimsy text patterns.
So it's guessing cleverly, not reasoning robustly.
Exactly. But there was one really interesting outlier, GPT-4o.
What did it do?
It scored really low, just 3.4%.
That sounds terrible. Did it just fail completely?
Not quite. Its low score wasn't just from guessing wrong. It was often because GPT-4o refused to answer when the image was missing.
It refused.
Yeah. It seemed to recognize the input was incomplete and just abstained, which, looks bad on a leaderboard score like 3.4%.
But in a real hospital.
In a real hospital, refusing to guess when you lack critical information might actually be the safer, more appropriate action. It suggests it was less swayed by those tempting text shortcuts.
That's a really important nuance. A low score could actually signal better behavior in some contexts.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's modality. What about other shortcuts? Stress tests 3 and 4.
Right. These tests were designed to poke at those shallow heuristics, to see if models rely on superficial stuff, like the format of the test itself.
Like gaming the system.
Kinda. Stress test 3 was simple, format perturbation. We just randomly shuffled the multiple choice options. A, B, C, D became, say, C, A, D, B.
If the model understands the question and answers, the order shouldn't matter.
Exactly, but it did. Across the board, especially in that text-only setting where models were already struggling, shuffling the options caused accuracy to drop.
How much?
For GPT-5, it went from that 37.7% down to 32%, just from rearranging the letters.
That clearly shows it's learned some bias about where the answer usually sits. Like, maybe C is slightly more common in the training data.
It suggests a reliance on answer position bias, yeah. It's classic test-taking strategy, not actual medical reasoning.
Okay, so that's position. What was stress test 4? Distractor replacement.
This one looked at how models use the wrong answers, the distractors. We know humans, and likely AIs, often work by eliminating the options they know are incorrect.
Right, process of elimination.
So again, in the text-only setting, we started replacing the plausible medical distractors with totally irrelevant options, like replacing a wrong diagnosis with the word banana or something unrelated.
And what happens if you replace more distractors?
Accuracy went down steadily. As we took away the plausible wrong answers that relied on eliminating, the models got worse. GPT-5 dropped from its 37.7% all the way down to 20%, basically random guessing when we replaced all 4 distractors.
So its success wasn't about identifying the right answer from the text, but about recognizing the wrong ones it had learned to discard.
It seems heavily reliant on those learned question-option associations, yes. But then we did something really clever, the unknown trick.
The unknown trick. What's that?
We replaced just one of the distractor options with the word unknown.
Okay. What would you expect that to do? Maybe make the model less certain? Or maybe choose unknown if it's unsure?
You might think so, but that's not what happened.
What did happen?
Adding unknown actually boosted performance. Consistently, across all models, GPT-5's score went up by over 5 percentage points.
Up. How does adding unknown make it better?
It seems the models didn't interpret unknown as a signal of uncertainty or a potential correct answer. They treated it like a really weak, easily dismissible distractor.
So removing one plausible wrong answer and replacing it with something easy like unknown just made the process of elimination simpler.
Exactly. It effectively made the choice easier, making the model more confident in the remaining options. It turned a signal that should perhaps induce caution into a tool for increasing certainty.
That's counterintuitive and kind of worrying.
It is. And these issues point towards even deeper problems revealed in the next tests, 5 and 6, looking at visual and reasoning failures.
Okay, stress test 5. Visual substitution. This sounds like a direct test of that visual text integration we talked about.
It was designed precisely for that. We took 40 NEJM questions, kept the text, kept the multiple choice options identical, but we swapped the original image for a different one specifically, an image that actually supported one of the distractor answers.
So you created a conflict. The text points one way, the image points another. A robust model should notice this conflict, right? Maybe struggle, maybe revise its answer based on the image.
That was the idea. But the result was, well, a collapse. Performance just plummeted. GPT-5 dropped over 31 percentage points, from 83% accuracy down to about 52%.
Wow, a 30-point drop just by showing it an image that contradicts the text pattern it expected.
Exactly. Gemini 2.5 Pro fell by 33 points. It strongly indicates that their initial high scores weren't from genuinely integrating visual and textual data on the fly.
It sounds more like they learned specific visual patterns associated with specific text patterns or labels, and when those patterns clashed, the system just broke.
That's what the evidence suggests. Brittle, learned pairings rather than flexible, integrated reasoning. Which brings us to the final test, number 6, reasoning signal.
Okay, this one looked inside the reasoning process itself, using chain of thought.
Yes, color prompting forces the model to show its work, to explain its reasoning step by step. The hypothesis is, if a model is truly reasoning, making it spell out the steps should improve accuracy, or at least maintain it.
But I have a feeling that's not what happened.
It was very mixed. For several models, CUDA actually reduced performance. Making them explain themselves made them worse.
How can explaining the reasoning make it worse?
That's the puzzle.
Yeah.
But the truly disturbing findings came when researchers manually read and audited those step-by-step rationales. That's where the fabrication became undeniable.
Okay, bring down this fabrication again. What were the types you saw?
2 main concerning types. First was hallucinated perception.
Hallucinated perception.
The model would arrive at the correct final answer, let's say pneumonia. But its explanation, its reasoning steps, would describe features in the chest X-ray, like specific shadows or infiltrates, that simply were not there in the actual image.
So it got the right answer, but justified it based on imaginary evidence.
Precisely. The reasoning sounds medically plausible if you don't look closely at the image, but it's based on things the model hallucinated.
Okay, that's one type. What was the other?
Confident, false heuristics. Here, the model might provide a rationale that sounds very expert. It might, quote, correct medical facts seem to follow logical steps, but the underlying logic connecting those facts to specific case, or the final conclusion drawn, is just wrong, factually incorrect, or medically unsound. It mimics the form of expert reasoning, but the substance is flawed. It's confident, plausible, and totally wrong.
That combination seems particularly dangerous for deployment. It looks like it knows what it's doing.
It creates this powerful illusion of deep understanding while potentially being fundamentally misguided.
So taking all these stress tests together, the modality issues, the shortcut learning, the fabricated reasoning, it seems like the high scores on standard tests are really misleading.
That's the inescapable conclusion. If models fail so clearly under stress, yet ace the standard evaluations, then the problem isn't just the models, it's the evaluations themselves. We have to essentially benchmark the benchmarks.
Right. The tests are rewarding the wrong things. So how do we fix that? How did the sources suggest we evaluate these models better?
They proposed moving beyond single scores and using what they called clinician-guided profiling.
Clinician-guided profiling.
Yeah, they had actual clinicians analyze the different benchmarks, NEJM, JAMA, others using a detailed rubric, not just text or visual, but digging into about 10 medically meaningful dimensions.
What kinds of dimensions are we talking about? Things doctors actually care about.
Exactly. Things like, how many reasoning steps does this question require? How much clinical context is needed? Is it solvable from text alone? How much fine-grained visual detail do you need to spot? They created a profile for each benchmark based on these clinical factors.
And what did mapping out that benchmark landscape reveal?
It made the differences crystal clear. NEJM, for instance, ranked high on both reasoning complexity and the need for visual detail. That explains why performance dropped so much when the image was removed.
Okay, and JAMA?
JAMA also required substantial reasoning, but it scored high on text alone solvable, which confirms why removing the image didn't hurt scores much. The answer was usually in the text anyway.
And other benchmarks, like VQARA.
That one was highly visually dependent, but low on reasoning complexity. It might just ask the AI to identify something basic in the image, not make a complex diagnosis.
So the big takeaway for you listening is,
Yeah.
you can't treat a high score on NEJM the same as a high score on JAMA or VQARAD. They're measuring different things.
Absolutely. Lumping them into one aggregate score completely hides these critical failure modes we've been discussing. Progress needs to be reported along these specific medically relevant axes.
We should see benchmarks less as a final exam and more as diagnostic tools. Tools to understand what a model can and cannot do.
That's a great way to put it. They reveal distinct capabilities and weaknesses, not just a single grade. We need to know why a model succeeds or fails. Is it visual integration? Is it complex reasoning? Is it falling back on shortcuts?
So wrapping this up, this deep dive really shows that the impressive headline scores, it can create a false sense of security, a false signal of progress.
Yeah, because the current systems often reward pattern matching and clever test taking over genuine medical understanding and robustness.
And the call to action seems clear. We need stress testing built into the evaluation process from the start.
Urgently. We have to demand that these AI systems prove they succeed for the right reasons, using clinically sound logic, not just because they've learned to game the test format. Trust requires transparency about how they work, not just that they get a high score sometimes.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with a final, really thought-provoking point for you to consider, and it comes directly from that unknown distractor test.
Right, where adding unknown actually made models like GPT-5 more confident in their answers.
Exactly. So here's the question to mull over. In real-world medicine, you almost never have perfect information, right? You get maybe a blurry scan, an incomplete patient history. So in that messy reality, what kind of AI should we prioritize?
Should it be the model that, like GPT-5 in that test, uses those weak cues, those potential shortcuts, to make an educated guess, maybe becoming more confident because some options seem less likely?
Or should we prioritize the model that behaves more like GPT-4o did in that one specific test, the one that recognizes critical information is missing and shows the maybe humility or caution to just refuse to answer, to abstain rather than guess based on shaky ground?
It's that fundamental tension between confident overprediction, which could be dangerously wrong, and cautious abstention, which might miss a diagnosis but avoids inventing one. Where that balance should lie is a massive question as we think about integrating AI safely into patient care.